So let's talk about Facebook's rebrand to the name Meta today, like Meta World Peace. I'm here in Puerto Rico. It's beautiful. You can see there's trees literally everywhere. Everything's just green and growing and alive. It's nice and warm out today. But Facebook announced recently they're going to change their name. Today they revealed the name as Meta. And, they're basically saying, well, this is our entry into creating the best metaverse in the world and so on. And so what they're really doing is they're trying to find a way, let me get set up right here. There we go. They're trying to find a way to offset all of the bad news that they've had recently. And look, there's been a lot of bad news about Facebook, right? They're, they've internally known that their software is, mentally damaging to teenagers, that it's contributed significantly to an increase in, teenage suicides. They, have had other issues with politics and things like that, and, suppressing people and not suppressing people and so on and so forth. And, from a marketing perspective, as a business owner, I've been running a marketing agency for 5 years. I've worked with a ton of phenomenal people in the world. And, some of the top marketers in the world I've been able to work with. And what this really means and what they're really doing is they're trying to change the narrative. And as a company, this is something that most companies fail to do. In fact, most companies fail to even develop the narrative. And the narrative is, the story that people say about your company. And the problem is, if you get a very large company, you have a lot of exposure. The more people you hire, the more market share you take, the better you do, the more exposed you are to, negative narratives. And part of what Facebook is doing, and part of the reason why they've done so well, other than, their software being very addictive, one of the things that they've done very well is, to frame the narrative around their business. And so when they decide, hey, look, we're getting a lot of negative feedback, and Facebook, by the way, is more than just Facebook. It's, it's Facebook, it's Oculus, it's Instagram, it's WhatsApp. So Facebook is a lot bigger than just the Facebook platform or software. And so Mark Zuckerberg and his team are all developers. They're all people that understand technology, and to a large extent, they understand people too. If they didn't, they wouldn't be able to build the kind of business that they have. So this whole rebrand of what they're doing isn't so much about them changing what they're doing. It's really them taking control of the narrative around their company. The last few weeks, it's all been negative news. Everybody's talking about how bad they are, how they lie, and they're hiding stuff. And what they need to do at this point to continue to control their own narrative is to change it. So rebranding, maybe they've been working on this for a while, maybe not, but rebranding allows them to change what it is people are talking about when it comes to their company. Now people are talking about, well, they're going to be part of this metaverse, right? This digital universe that people are going to live in and buy and sell things in and communicate through via blockchain, AR and VR and these phenomenal technologies. And so what they can do is they can say, hey, look, we're really progressive, smart, technologically incredible company, and Facebook's just one part of that, but we're really part of this metaverse. We're really going to be pioneering how people communicate using this technology. And the interesting thing is, there's a lot of companies that have done this. The cigarette company Philip Morris changed their name. I think it was 20 years ago. You can fact check it. They changed their name to Altria, and they attempted to purchase partial ownership in a company called Juul, which makes those electronic nicotine devices that you can use in place of cigarettes. Now, if they had tried to do that as Philip Morris, what do you think the response would have been? first of all, it would have negatively impacted sales for Juul, but they also probably would have had a lot harder time getting approval for it because the name Altria is not associated with, the negative aspect of cigarettes, the way Philip Morris is. And so if you're, looking at the news on a daily basis and you're trying to figure out what does this mean, but not just what does this mean, how do I use this? A great lesson you can take away from what Facebook is doing is that if you want to continue to scale a business, you have to be in control of the narrative at all times. And when the narrative gets out of your control, which for a lot of companies is gonna happen, it's not really an if, it's a when. When the narrative gets outside of your control, you have to take back control by changing the subject. It's a classic thing. It's been done all kinds of times. Superstar athletes do this when they're accused of violence or something. Their PR people will put out that they're doing some kind of charity event, and so everybody talks about that instead of the fact that, maybe they punched their girlfriend in an elevator or something like that. So when you're running a business, the lesson you can learn from Facebook is, don't allow somebody else to control the narrative. You have to take control of it. And it's not, there's a great book called Damage Control that talks a lot about this. How do you deal with like a negative PR situation? How do you fix that? And the biggest recommendation typically isn't to deny things, and it isn't to, fight back. A lot of times, the best thing to do is to change the conversation. And, there's some great strategies. You can fight back if somebody's in the wrong, and you can typically be okay. But the problem is, human beings have this bias to continue to believe something once they've heard it, even if it's not true. A good example of this is like dog years. Like people say, oh, dog years are like 7 years to a human year. There's no basis for that at all. There's no scientific basis to that statement. It's just something that's been said and repeated often enough that people can't stop believing it because it's just become a socially accepted idea, even though there's no truth or basis to it. When it comes to your business, when it comes to, you taking your business to the next level, you're not going to be able to do that by trying to deny things or trying to say, oh no, it wasn't our fault. People expect, if you run a business, people expect you to be responsible and accountable for everything. Even when it isn't your fault, you have to be responsible. And what you'll notice is if you look at companies over the course of, the last 100 years, a lot of the companies that have lasted a long time haven't been without some kind of problem or controversy, but the way that they handle it is radically different than a lot of other companies do. They don't say, oh, they're lying, and, even though, they don't try to deny things either. A lot of times what they'll do is they'll fight back by basically, putting the person accusing them of something in a negative light. So people will say, wow, this person was a stripper that did cocaine and blah, blah, blah. I can't trust them anymore, so they probably lied. Or they changed the conversation. And as a business person, you have to make the decision, which way do you want to go? When you're in a crisis situation, when the narrative around your product or industry is not positive, how do you change it? Do you, attack the integrity of the person that is creating the negative stigma for your product or industry? Or do you change the conversation? As you can tell with Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg's a pretty smart business person. So you can tell with, what they're doing, instead of them trying to continue to deny these allegations that they know are true and that they know they suppressed, they're just changing the conversation, allowing them over the course of the next couple of years to slip away from this negative stigma of what they do as a company into being something else and doing something else, even though Facebook will likely be mostly unchanged.